Welcome to a discussion of life lessons of the Psalms. The Psalms are a part of the wisdom literature of the Old Testament. In the wisdom literature, real life and real people are the subject, and all of their emotions: joy, happiness, fulfillment, faith in God, being blessed, as well as being disappointed, being disillusioned, being abandoned, suffering from physical and mental pain. And sometimes the challenges can be so great they cause us to question God and God's love for us. For this reason, the wisdom books of the Old Testament are wonderful places to begin to study and think about the life lessons of the Bible. Today we're going to look at a life lesson from the book of Psalms, and the lesson is, "It's on me," is a very positive statement. I'm going to begin the discussion by sharing with you something I read many, many years ago. It was an article about how we as human beings defend ourselves when we've done something wrong. How we explain away dysfunctional behaviors, especially behaviors that hurt other people. And in that article, the author said, the way we defend ourselves is by blaming others, and he offered three categories. He said, first of all, we blame our DNA. I did it. What would you expect from an Italian, a German, an English person, or in my case, a Polak? It's not my fault. It's the fault of my DNA. It is the fault of the country where my parents and grandparents and great-grandparents came from. How else would I behave? What else would I say? I'm innocent. Don't blame me. We can blame our family, nuclear family. Some have said to me in the past, hey, my mother and my father drank alcohol at home. They allowed me to take sips. I learned to drink at a very early age. I still drink alcohol today. Not my fault. My parents' fault. Or others have said, when my parents talked about those people, they always used derogatory terms. I learned those terms at a very young age, and I still use them. But it's not my fault. It's my family's fault. And if I had grown up in a different family, I wouldn't do this drinking or name-calling. Or we can always blame society. If society is doing it, if my friends and neighbors are doing it, why shouldn't I be doing it? Studies say that we often do things that are not our beliefs and not necessarily our values, but we do them and say them so that we can belong to the group. And again, it's a blame game. I blame my society for why I do the things that I do. Now, I call blaming, and in this case, DNA, family, and society, as scapegoating. Where scapegoating is blaming others for what we do. It's a way of defending ourselves. And I've got to say to you, scapegoating is a very hard piece of work. Because we're always defending ourselves, always remembering what we said last, always trying to be consistent in why we explain the hurtful things that we do to others. And I also have to say that when we scapegoat, It leads to all kinds of spiritual, psychological, and physical problems. It is very wearing and tearing on us. When I was a full-time parish pastor, in the church that I served, in the offices, there was a poster about hate. I could not find this poster on Google, but I'm going to share with you how I remember it. And the poster said, "Hate raises blood pressure." Where there's hate, there's always going to be blood pressure. There's always going to be that tightening up. You can feel the tension. Hate causes chest pains. It just feels wrong right in the middle of my chest. Hate causes stomach problems. We're not very comfortable with what we eat. We don't feel good. The digestive tract is off. This is not a good thing when we have hate. And hate makes us irritable. Anybody who's been around an irritable person knows it's no fun to be around an irritable person. But the last line on the poster is what always caught my attention. Hate doesn't make the one hated feel good either. I would change the word hate on top of that poster for this discussion and put in it scapegoating. When we scapegoat, when we blame others for the things that we do, especially the hurtful ones, in the end, it probably is going to raise our blood pressure, cause us chest pains, cause stomach problems, and make us irritable. Now, if this is the case, I think it's very fair to ask, what do the Psalms teach about our responsibility to our hurtful behaviors and mistakes? How do we deal with them? And I'm going to suggest to you that we look to the penitential Psalms to see how we deal with them. Because they do address these behaviors. And the Psalms we're going to look out of that category are going to be Psalms 32, 51, and Psalm 130. Psalm 32 describes the consequences of scapegoating. Verses 3 to 4 of that psalm. While I kept silent, my body wasted away through my groaning all day long. For day and night your hand was heavy upon me. My strength was dried up by the heat of summer. Sounds an awful lot like that poster in my church offices. Look at what it does. Body wasting away through groaning and feeling uncomfortable and tossing and all of the stress and the pain. And my strength dries up. Perfect example of scapegoating. And then we turn to verse 5. Then I acknowledged my sin to you, and I did not hide my iniquity. I said, I will confess my transgressions to the Lord, and you forgave the guilt of my sin. So what the psalm does in verses 3 and 4 is to say, I tried scapegoating, and now I have turned to say, I cannot deal with this issue without acknowledging what I did is on me. And I am sorry. What a transition between verse 4 and verse 5. Now, in this psalm, there's the word guilt. And guilt is the consequences of behaviors that damage or break a relationship. Guilt is always something done in the past. That's where the origin of guilt comes from something that was hurtfully done in the past. And when I am feeling guilty, I ask, what have I done? What specifically are the behaviors? And then what behaviors need to be changed so this does not happen again? This is not theory. It is not making things up. It is not just playing with ideas. It's dealing with something extremely concrete. Now, that is deep, and it's thoughtful, and it's rational. When we turn to Psalm 130, we get an emotional cry with the same motivation. And the cry is to God to listen to the confession of the psalmist. Now, the thoughts are the same, but listen to the tone between Psalm 32 and Psalm 130. Out of the depths have I cried to you, O Lord. Lord, hear my voice. Let your ears be attentive to the voice of my supplications. Listen to my voice. Can you hear? Please, I'm hurting. Listen to my voice and deal with me. The psalmist of Psalm 130 is conflicted about what the psalmist has done. Now, we don't know what the psalmist did. We don't know the past event that is causing this anguish and cry out to God. But when I read the commentaries on this psalm, it was suggested that the psalmist is dealing with the Ten Commandments. Suggested. But it makes sense. If we're going to take a look at the commandments, the first three deal with our relationship with God. And so we can ask is, did the psalmist do something that hurt his or her relationship with God? Did the psalmist worship another God? Did the psalmist use God's name wrongfully to support a lie? Did the psalmist not worship on the Sabbath? Maybe. It would certainly cause some anguish within the psalmist. But when we get to honor fathering and mother through the commandments on coveting, we're dealing with both society and individuals. When we break those commandments, we are threatening the stability and the harmony and the peace of society. And when we break those commandments, we are also possibly hurting another individual. These are all possible places, and we're picking one or two to say, the psalmist is saying, God, what have I done? And please listen, I come asking for help. Now, Psalm 51, which is perhaps the most famous or well-known of the penitential psalms, has these words. For I know my transgressions and my sin is ever before me. I know it's my sins. I'm not blaming my DNA. I'm not blaming my nuclear family or my parents. I'm not blaming society. This is me. And I accept that. And I own it. It's on me. Now the psalmist goes beyond the individual incidents that could hurt other people. And the psalmist goes on to talk about being born guilty. And here are the words. Indeed, I was born guilty, a sinner when my mother conceived me. Psalm 51:5. I was born. It is me. And a sinner when my mother conceived me. The psalmist admits it is part of his or her default system, and I'm using computer language here, to do hurtful things to other people. We need to define sin in order to understand what is being said in this psalm. And we need to define sins, which is often transgressions, or is interpreted as transgressions. Sin is to be self-centered. Everything centers around the individual, including God. The sinner determines for himself or herself what is good and evil, what is right or wrong, what their values, attitudes, and lifestyles are going to be. The sinner stands in the very center, and everything surrounding the sinner has to meet the needs of the sinner. Self-centeredness. And as I just said, sin is the default system of human beings, and so the church has called sin the original sin in this single. I am born guilty. I was born with original sin. I can't blame anybody else but what I am doing. Now, sins, with an S, plural, are the transactions, the deeds that an individual act has done. It is the acts in the past. I did this that was hurtful. What A or B or C, or pick out whatever commandment you want to think about. Sins of the transactions are the 10 Commandments, as I just alluded to. And I'm not going to do them again because we just went through them. But what specific deeds did I do to hurt the relationship with God? And what specific deeds did I do or say to hurt my relationships in society? Or what did I do to hurt relationships with an individual? Now, I want to stress this, and this is extremely important. The purpose of the 10 Commandments is to build healthy relationships with God and strong communities. The 10 Commandments are not a legalistic system to be practiced by rote. Their purpose is to bring God, creation, human beings, you and me, together. And that's why so often we refer to the 10 Commandments as a way to determine how we behave and what we need to do about our behaviors. Now, when we come to God crying out, hear my prayer, I know my transgressions, and we are confessing, the confession comes with expectations. And the expectations when we ask for forgiveness are to come in hope. The expectations are that we will tell others. And the expectations are that we will praise God. And here are 3 Psalms that do that for us. Psalm 130, Psalm 32, and Psalm 51. After the psalmist cries out, O Lord, hear my voice, be attentive to the voice of my supplication, the psalmist says, if you, O Lord, should mark iniquities, Lord, who shall stand? But there is forgiveness with you, that you may be revered. If there's no hope for forgiveness, Why ask for forgiveness? Why confess? But the psalmist knows it is part of God's nature to forgive when you come sincerely and ask for forgiveness. So he's not coming as haughty, proud, that's it, I don't care. He's coming by saying, I am truly sorry. It is truly on me. Psalm 51 follows the same line. Have mercy on me, O God, according to your steadfast love, according to your abundant mercy, blot out my transgressions. Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin. Here we're talking about God forgiving behaviors and even coming to address the default system. And why does God do that? And the expectation is God does it because God loves and because God is merciful. It's a part of the nature of God that drives the confession and the request for forgiveness. And confession comes with the expectations of changes in behavior. You will remember I said guilt comes from what was actually done. When you do that and you confess it, the expectation is you're going to change your behaviors. And so in Psalm 32, I will instruct you and teach you in the way that you should go. I will counsel you with my eye upon you. Because I gave up scapegoating, because I came sincerely and repentant in confession, because I expected forgiveness and rejoice in forgiveness, I can now share that experience with you and all of the benefits of that experience or experiences. Psalm 51 follows up the same thought. Then I will teach transgressors your ways, and sinners will return to you. Simply put, if God can forgive me, God can forgive you. Trust and hope. Psalm 32 also has the expectation of singing God's praises. Gave up scapegoating, confessed, expected and received forgiveness. Now, the psalmist writes, be glad in the Lord and rejoice, O righteous, and shout for joy, all you upright in heart. When you confess, when you're forgiven, when you're restored, your heart rejoices because you become a whole person again. And not like the scapegoating defined in Psalm 32, where we began dealing with these Psalms, where my body wasted away all day long. Psalm 51 again. Deliver me from blood shed, O God of my salvation, and my tongue will sing aloud your deliverance. I'm going to tell how great it feels when our relationship has been restored and we can be one together again. Now, in conclusion, confronting hurtful behaviors and restoring relationships occur when there's no scapegoating. We don't blame anybody else. We accept responsibility. It's on me and no one else. Not my DNA, not my family, not my society. We ask for forgiveness, and asking for forgiveness is extremely important in this process. We're open to changing our behaviors. When we go back and look at what we have done, what has caused guilt inside of us, then we need to be ready to say, I am not going to do that again. Or perhaps, if I had done this then, we wouldn't be having this problem. So the next time this happens, this is what I am going to do. We share the joys of being forgiven and talk about the importance of owning our own actions. And I think all of this can be summed up with, it's on me. When we say that, it is a very positive statement because it leads to restoration, forgiveness, and an abundant life. I want to thank you for being here today, for being a part of this discussion, for watching. I hope it gave you some new insights. I hope it gave you some peace. I even hope it may have affirmed some of things that you've already believed. And I hope it may have raised a question or two, because that's how we grow our faith. Again, thank you for participating in this discussion.